Hello everyone, Bella Malloy here, host of Seek Travel Ride, and welcome to another midweek episode where I am fueling your stoke for bike adventures. This week we are going to be transported all the way to Africa, and Kenya more specifically, as I feature listener Paul Edkins sharing what it was like on his amazing African journey for one day of his trip. Paul undertook a massive journey, leaving from his home in London to head all the way down to South Africa. He's originally South African and he wanted to take this trip to reconnect to his roots. And what a monumental way of doing it. A journey so long means that you are guaranteed for adventures within adventures, and that is certainly the case for Paul. So enough of me talking, let's hear Paul Edkins share one day of his trip.
My name is Paul Edkins, and in 2023 I cycled from London to South Africa. I wanted to do this mostly because I thought that pushing myself out of my comfort zone would be a good way to deal with a midlife crisis. But it was also an idea that emerged from lots of things happening in my life at that time. I was born in South Africa, and I'd been living in the UK for 25 years at this point. I hadn't been back to South Africa for 18 years, and I'd started to develop a longing to return to see my country. I missed the animals, the birds, the big sky, the happy smiles, the open and welcoming nature of the people. I still felt South African inside, but I wanted to find out if that still made sense if I walked the streets of my childhood. Had I lost my roots? The second reason I decided to do this was that I'd just gone through a tough breakup, and I felt like I needed to rediscover some of my passions, like cycling. But I'd never done any long-distance cycle touring before. There is nothing like trying something you've never done that everyone tells you is a scary idea to teach you who you really are. The third reason was that I wanted to do something for the two causes that I care the most about, which are protecting animals and empowering women. I found an organization in South Africa called the Black Mambas, who are the world's first all-female anti-poaching group. So I raised some money for them, and I made their animal park my final destination. And the final reason, I needed to lose some weight. This was as good a reason as any to cycle solo across the world. So with all these ideas, I bought an adventure bike and all the gear. I planned the journey, arranged the farewell party, and off I went for my first ever bike tour. I spent 4 months in Europe and 5 months in Africa. In Europe, I stuck mostly to the big rivers, the Rhine, the Main, the Danube, and I avoided the mountains because I'm a little bit lazy. I also followed the western and southern coast of Turkey for a month. Absolutely gorgeous. There was still a war in Syria, so I decided to fly over the Mediterranean to Cairo and follow the Nile down to Sudan. Unfortunately, along the way, Sudan also fell into war, so I flew over Sudan to Addis Ababa and continued on the road south through Ethiopia, then Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, and Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. One of my more interesting stories came from a mistake I made in the south of Kenya. I'd been riding along the tarmac for months, and I decided to be more adventurous and take a more off-road route. My plan was to take a back road to a campsite next to Amboseli National Park, which is famous for having loads of elephants, and it sits under the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, the roads were not well marked on Google Maps, and my navigation devices didn't know much about this area, but I figured I could probably manage my way through. Or so I thought. Initially, the road was hard and slow, like 50 kilometers over corrugations. But I was rewarded with wild encounters with giraffe, zebra, and wildebeest. In most of Africa, the wildlife parks have no fences. The animals can roam anywhere they want to. I arrived at the gates of Amboseli. I told the ranger I wanted to visit a campsite on the other side of the park, and I would take a road around the edge of the park through some remote areas. He said I must take a guide. I resisted. I like moving at my own pace. But the ranger was quite insistent, and it was getting late, so I relented. My guide was a Maasai man called Kalulu, and he rode his motorcycle ahead of me, and I followed him through on the dusty single tracks. I was glad for Kalulu because the paths crisscrossed all over the place. I would have got lost easily on my own. I was going slower than usual because of rocks and huge holes in the paths. At one point we had to stop because Kalulu's motorcycle got a flat tire from a bent wheel rim. It took ages to hammer the rim back into shape and pump up the tire manually. It had been a long day and the sun started to go down. I was getting a bit nervous because I was still a long way from the campsite. I'd completely misjudged how slow the progress would be on these back roads. In Africa, when the sun goes down, it gets very dark very quickly. And nighttime is not a good time to be wandering the grasslands when predators might be around. I put my head torch on and carried on following Kalulu's motorbike quite closely so that I didn't lose the road. Kalulu was speeding through the darkness, and I pedaled as fast as I could to keep up with him and follow his tracks. I scanned the road and the edge of the wilderness with my torch. Everything was pitch black apart from the red glow of Kalulu's rear lights. Suddenly, I saw a hyena about 10 meters to the left of the road. I saw the reflection of its eyes, its sloped back, its spotted fur. It was just sitting there looking at me. I pedaled a bit faster. Moments after passing the hyena, I didn't see a huge rock in the middle of the road. I slammed into it, did a front flip, and landed on the gravel. I was a bit bruised and grazed, but luckily nothing broken. I quickly got to my feet, found my torch, and pointed it in every direction into the darkness. I gathered my senses. My breath was steaming through the light of my head torch. Kalulu had carried on ahead and I couldn't see him anymore. I saw that my front wheel was completely buckled. It couldn't turn in the frame. There I was, stuck alone in the dark, without a rideable bike, far from any village or campsite, about 100 meters from a hyena. I started to gather the pieces of my bike that had fallen off. I kept looking around with my torch to check if there were hyenas or lions around. Thankfully, Kalulu had quickly realized I wasn't behind him anymore, had turned around and come back. I showed him my broken bike, but my main concern was being attacked by a lion. I asked him to watch out for lions, but he kept looking at my bike. I got stressed and said, "Please, watch out for lions coming to attack us." He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I am Maasai. If a lion comes, he will eat me first." This was his way of explaining that he will be the first line of defense. He was only holding his wooden stick that all Maasai men carry, so I didn't feel comforted at the time. But in retrospect, it was an explanation of Maasai culture. Traditionally, a Maasai boy had to kill a lion to become a man. Now the practice is outlawed, but the Maasai still live in close quarters with wildlife and the men do not show fear. Luckily, one of Kalulu's friends passed by on a motorbike heading the other direction, and he offered to help. We strapped my bike to his motorbike, and I went on the back of Kalulu's, carrying all my pannier bags. It took another 45 minutes on a really bumpy road to arrive at the campsite. I'd completely misjudged the timing of the day. Thank goodness for Kalulu and his friend. The next day, the owner of the campsite gave me a lift on the back of his motorbike to a local village. I took my bent rim to a motorbike repair shop and was introduced to a mechanic called Fakofi. Fakofi had the strongest hands of any man I've ever met. He managed to grip and bend and twist and hammer the rim back into a rideable shape. There was no bicycle shop anywhere around for 100 kilometers, so I was incredibly grateful to Fakofi. That night, I watched the campsite owner slaughter a goat from scratch. It was fascinating. He gave his dog a bowl of the blood to drink. He knew every part of the animal and how to separate it correctly. His wife said, "If he didn't know how to slaughter a goat, I wouldn't have married him." Defending against lions and slaughtering livestock are minimum requirements for manhood in Maasai culture. All I can do is make a good spreadsheet. The next day, I went on a jeep safari in Amboseli Park. It was fantastic, exactly what I used to do growing up in South Africa. On the way back, we passed a couple of lions lying in the bushes on the side of a road near the campsite. The following morning when I left, that was exactly the road that I took. Luckily, the lions had moved on, but I did pass 3 elephants. It's quite magical to be on a bicycle near to these huge beasts with nothing between you except a few meters of grass. Months later, I crossed the border into South Africa and I discovered that, yes, I do still feel it's right to call myself South African. There is something about the people, the warmth, the sounds, the landscapes that I am still deeply connected to. I cannot wait till my next midlife crisis. There are so many more places I want to travel to.
Wow, thank you so much, Paul. You really transported me there, right in the middle of Kenya in the dark of the night. My heart in my mouth to think what I would have done in the exact same situation. There are a few things which really struck me. The first is that you took this journey on without any bike adventure travel experience, and it seems like you took it in your stride. London to South Africa is no insignificant feat, and I love the fact that you didn't have experience, didn't put you off from giving this massive journey a go. I also love the fact that you were fundraising for the Black Mambas, having researched a bit more about them since getting this audio. What an amazing, impressive organisation. Listeners, I'm going to provide a link in the show notes to the Black Mambas so you can find out all about them as well. But now let's get into the adventure within the adventure here. As I said, a few things struck out for me. The first was that you were sick of the tarmac and you wanted adventure. And I wonder, in hindsight, if you could reflect back, would you have taken on the adventure that unfolded for you? Had you known that you'd be on a corrugated dirt track, that darkness would descend, you'd be following a Maasai guide, almost hitting a hyena, breaking your bike and then spending a few hours being worried about lions. I know that everything worked out, so you'd probably say, yeah, of course I'd take this on. That is obviously hindsight, but it's also the unplanned. You could never write a script that says that this is going to happen to you, and yet I feel whenever I interview people who take adventures all around the world, these are the sort of amazing, nuts out, crazy stories that I hear about. The second thing was just the insight to the Maasai culture there with your Maasai guide, Kalulu. This beautiful culture that's grown up around wild animals, and him proudly sort of telling you, well, what are you worried about? I'm here to defend you. They're not going to get past me. I love that notion of it. And then for coffee, oh my goodness me, he sounds like an absolute strongman. I'm just picturing him there wrestling with your wheel and getting it back in true. And what a lifesaver as well, because it sounds like you were far away from any bike stores. It's something else that has also struck me. I've interviewed a few bike travellers now who've had equipment breakdowns in Africa, and actually not just in Africa, but all around the world. And somehow there has always been a solution. It might not have been the most conventional solution, but it's one that has worked for them and kept them on their journeys. And it sounds like that happened for you as well. The other thing that struck me that you mentioned there was that when it gets dark in Africa, it happens very quickly, almost like a snap of the fingers. And it was interesting to sort of hear how that difference between daytime and nighttime happened so quickly on these dirt tracks. And I could just imagine what that would have been like. Now, listeners, I am excited to say that since I've received this, I have actually recorded a full session with Paul Edkins, and we're going to hear about all of his adventure from London all the way to South Africa. All the adventure stories in between, and how a complete novice like Paul took on such a monumental journey. So keep your ears and eyes peeled for that episode to drop in the coming weeks. And thank you very much, Paul, for sharing your story. Now, listeners, if you want to know how you can be part of these midweek episodes, it's pretty easy. You just need to get in touch with me and tell me all about one day of your trip. The easiest way to do so is probably to send me a direct message on Instagram. My account handle there is @SeekTravelRide. Or if you want a more conventional approach, send me an email to podcast@seektravelride.com. Tell me all about your bike adventure story, and let's see if I can get you featured in these episodes during the week. Okay, now it's time for the part of the show which I absolutely love, and that is where I get to say a big thank you to you, my super fans, who have been magnanimous and bought me some virtual coffees. Each week, these messages of support and virtual coffees come in. They fill me with joy, and they seriously help keep the podcast rolling. This week, I'm giving a shout out to Richard Weinberg, who says, Thanks for your podcast. I'm just home from a wonderful 3 weeks touring in Denmark and a wee bit of Sweden, and now I'm on to planning the next 3-week tour in Sweden. Richard, it sounds like you're having an absolutely monumental time. I've heard about Denmark and Sweden, 2 countries which really embrace that sort of outdoor culture, especially Sweden. I think they're really set up very well for outdoor sort of adventures. And I'm keen to hear more about your story. So let me know how the next 3 weeks in Sweden have panned out for you. And thank you so much for supporting me and the podcast. And next up I have Katrina Hayes, Birds, Bike and Ballet, previous podcast guest, absolute dead set legend. And you have bought me some virtual coffees and said, Bella, your podcast is such an asset to the bikepacking and bike touring community. Thank you for telling our stories and inspiring new adventures. Oh, Katrina, thank you for being so nice there with that beautiful message and for being an inspiration for so many. I've absolutely loved tracking your adventures since featuring you as a guest of the show. Listeners, if you hadn't heard Katrina's episode, she decided to celebrate a big birthday milestone with cycling the Great Divide mountain bike route. And she'd only gotten into mountain biking not too long beforehand. And what I really love about Katrina is she is constantly all about pushing herself to try new challenging off-road terrain and also really embraces the idea of the bikepacking community and riding with others and the solidarity that happens within that community too. And most recently, Katrina is taking to pack rafting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where perhaps a combination of bikepacking and pack rafting is going to take you, combining trails with rivers there. It's been awesome to see Katrina taking on first day in the pack raft to taking safety courses to learn how to navigate the water safely there as well. And I have to say, Katrina, it's something that has piqued my interest a little bit of sort of mixing and matching the adventure stuff. So far, I've limited that to bikepacking and hiking, but maybe there's some awesome rivers around me. Maybe I need to give pack rafting a go as well. Needless to say, thank you for being a legend and supporting the podcast. And listeners, if you would like to be like Katrina and Richard and buy me some virtual coffees, you can do so. Simply head to buymeacoffee.com/Seek Travel Ride. Buy me some virtual coffees, but more importantly, let me know what is it that you love about the podcast and where is your next bike adventure taking you? And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.